Larkey. I call myself a pracademic, which is a practical academic. I'm a teacher of children with autism and run a range of workshops to help teachers, parents and anyone who works or lives with children with autism spectrum disorder. On my website, www.suelarkey.com, you can find a range of fantastic tip sheets to download and share with family and friends and professionals who need help and guidance in helping kids on the spectrum. I just thought I'd talk through today one of the tip sheets. It's called 10 Essential Tips for Understanding Autism Spectrum Disorder. I think this is a great tip sheet, particularly for end of year in Australia coming up and New Zealand for transition. If people just work through these 10 tips and specifically put down how this applies to the kids they know, I think this will be a great starting point for kids starting 2011. The first one says, students with ASD don't have to look at you all the time. I know many students who, when they're processing, look down when they're thinking, and a lot of people think they're not actually listening or about to answer, but it's very important that you understand the individual child's way of giving eye contact and handing this information on to other people so that everybody doesn't have to relearn this child's way of processing. Other children I know actually fidget, and some of the girls will pick their fingernails as they're thinking, and that eye contact doesn't necessarily mean that the child's focused or concentrating. Number 2, give them time to answer your questions. We have many children on the spectrum who can take up to a minute to process information. This is one of the reasons that we actually use shortened sentences sometimes when we're working with children, because if there's too many words, it's too much to process. And these kids are visual learners, so it'd be better written down anyway. Number 3, if they feel under pressure, they'll give you stock standard answers. This particularly happens when kids aren't given time to process. So if you say to a child, Josh, sit in a chair, and you don't give them time to process that, they might give a stock standard answer like, no, go away, or run away. Their behaviour will be a stock standard response. I know one little girl, if adults approached her very quickly in the sandpit, she would give a stock standard response to run away. But when I worked with her, I found if I stayed about a metre away from her and said her name, Victoria, gave her time to know that I was actually going to come and talk to her, she had time to process that I was coming in to tell her to finish and pack away. Number 4, I think is one of the hardest parts when working with kids on the spectrum. That's that they don't generalise information. This means they don't transfer information from people, from one person to another, and from one place to another. And this can be really frustrating when you've seen a child do something with someone else and then you try and it doesn't work for you. I had one little boy who could do the most amazing jigsaw puzzles at home, yet at preschool he struggled to do the most simple puzzles. He hadn't generalised and transferred his knowledge of puzzles from home to his preschool environment. Number 5, I think for people who work with older students, particularly secondary, the fact these kids are extremely disorganised can be very frustrating. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say to me, he should know how to be organised by now. How come he can't find a pencil? But the reality is that would be like saying to me, can't you see now you've had glasses for years, let's get rid of your glasses. Children on the spectrum will always need help with organisation. This might be colour coding books, ensuring that they already have a sharp pencil, pre-ruling up pages. There's a whole range of organisational things that you can do. And maybe I'll talk about that in another video at another time. Number 6, limit their choices. I strongly believe no choice is a good choice for a kid on the spectrum. You could give a kid a whole range of puzzles to choose, but most kids on the spectrum will just go back and choose the same one over and over again. If you genuinely want this kid to choose, it's best just to start with 1 or 2 things. Or for example, homework these days. Often teachers will say, choose a topic, write about something you did in the holidays. For this kid, that's too broad. It'd be much better just saying, what did you do the first Saturday in the holidays? Or, what activities did you do, rather than the holidays, which is a huge, big topic. Or, for example, I had one darling boy whose special interest was dinosaurs, and his teacher said, write a project about a marsupial. He spent a week trying to find a dinosaur that was a marsupial. So for him, really he would have been better off choose koalas or kangaroos, which is what the teacher really wanted, than a dinosaur that was a marsupial. Number 7, be as clear, concise and concrete as possible. Kids on the spectrum are so literal. So if you said to a child on the spectrum, jump in the lake, they'd be looking for the lake. But everyone's heard that one. The one I think's more interesting is when people say, can you sit down? And the child thinks, yes, I can, but they don't do it. You didn't actually mean, can you sit down? You meant sit down. Be very careful with the language that you use. Number 8, avoid verbal overload. You might be feeling a bit verbally overloaded now, like there's been a lot of information to take in. In fact, if I asked you now what was the first thing I said to you on this video, you probably can't remember already. We all find verbal information really hard to remember. So we all tend to be visual learners, and that's why I'd encourage you to download the tip sheet to reread later and remind you some of the ideas you've heard today. Number 9, avoid verbal arguments. In my experiences, it's very hard to win a verbal argument with a kid on the spectrum. But particularly if you're working with a kid who has some oppositional defiance disorder, ODD, you might have seen that. Many of our kids tend to become oppositional if you try and back them into a corner. So I would encourage you to not get into arguments. And I think sometimes the arguments occur because we're not concise, as it says back up in number 7. And number 10, everybody needs positive feedback, but so do kids on the spectrum. And most kids on the spectrum don't like failure. In fact, we have many kids who we call Mr. Perfects, and these are kids who are really scared to make mistakes. I'd encourage everybody to make more mistakes around these kids and point out your mistakes. So walk into the shop, get there and think, oh, say it out loud. What was I here for? I've forgotten what I needed to buy. And then stand there and talk your processing through. Was it something for dinner? Was it something for tomorrow? Actually let the child hear the way you problem solve things. Because many kids on the spectrum are highly anxious about making mistakes. Parents, when you're driving, take a wrong turn, but say to the child, that's okay, I can go the other way. Or teachers, go to school tomorrow and call the child by the wrong name. Hi, Andrew. Oh no, you're not Andrew, you're Ben. That's okay, everyone makes mistakes. I think this is really important, particularly around social things, where many kids on the spectrum aren't prepared to take risks in social situations. Well, I hope you've got some good ideas from those 10 essential tips for understanding kids on the spectrum. Please feel free to download that and share it with as many people so we can all help kids on the spectrum, their family, and make a difference. Thank you.